Hey, noble ones, and welcome to Metatron's Academy. You know how on this channel we always look for videos that are interesting and peculiar from a linguistic perspective? Well, today, the title of this video intrigued me because the title is Rare Audio of Enslaved People Connects History to the Present. And then ABC News' Alex Prash examines rare audio formerly enslaved people to preserve their stories and interviews one of their descendants in partnership with the 10 Million Names Project. I don't know what this project is. So basically, yeah, being able to listen to the way someone who was a former slave spoke is fascinating to me. Because I'm thinking, depending on the person, were they born into slavery? Were they kidnapped but preserved some of the original language, depending on what age? And I know at least one slave who was kidnapped when she was like 10, but still could speak the Bantu language at age 90, even though for 80 years she was literally removed from Africa and placed into America. So without further ado, I'm going to listen to this, provide some commentary.
It's a voice rarely heard, the voice of a formerly enslaved person. Few know that in the decades following emancipation, interviews were done in an effort to preserve their stories. And in tonight's Prime Focus, you'll hear some of what they said as part of our partnership with the 10 Million Names Project. ABC's Alex Perche brings us their stories in their words.
Okay.
I want you to tell me how you got your name.
I got my name from President Jeff Davis. He was president of the Southern Confederation. He owned my grandfather and my father. My grandfather was a blacksmith, and my father had learned how to write a little bit in Richmond, Virginia before he brought him down there.
You're listening to the voice of a formerly enslaved American, a man by the name of George Johnson. This rare and historic audio interview was recorded in 1941, almost 80 years after Mr. Johnson gained his freedom. He and his family worked on a plantation in Virginia owned by Confederate leader Jefferson Davis, a staunch opponent of abolition. In the interview, Johnson recalls a day in the life as an enslaved person.
Okay, so this is going to be interesting also from a historical perspective, since it's going to tell us exactly what a day was for people that had to endure this. But I'm interested to see, so of course this is a native speaker, someone who was already completely removed from the origins, and but still you can tell, of course you can tell he sounds black. In fact, if you are black, if you're an African American specifically, how different does he sound to the way people speak now? Does he sound kind of like your grandfather? That's my question. And there is an interesting, because of course, when we look at this kind of situation, we might think, what did slaves sound like? But then again, it's remarkably diverse and complex. The linguistic landscape varied dramatically, not only because you had people from different areas of the world, or even different areas of Africa that were moved, but also because it depends what state they are in, right? Because that's going to also play a factor. But there is a distinct intonation to it. We're going to try and analyze it. I'm going to let him speak now and interrupt it for some time, and then I'll provide commentary.
They drive the slaves down there, and Davis has been very hard at it. They work them reasonable.
Reasonable. You know, Marshal Jewell gave my just another boy, and boy was chopping cotton. Boy didn't kill, but the gang, you understand? He come to hook the boy kill, you understand? Went to the house of Marshal Jewell boy. And that's what's the trouble, son. Said, Mr. Don't hook me, because I would kill the gang.
Audio tape interviews like this are striking and uncommon, but are actually part of a long legacy of black families, communities, and institutions, including historically black colleges and universities, that lead the way in collecting and preserving the oral histories of the formerly enslaved people in the 19th and 20th centuries.
You know, I already noticing one thing. Of course, his specific accent appears to be non-rhotic. He is basically not pronouncing the R at the end of words, or also in between, in the middle of a word, if it's not followed by a vowel. And but another thing that I'm noticing is not only the speed at which he speaks, but the emphasis he gives on certain words, like the word cotton. What this tells me is that it's very likely that the way this man was brought up, due to the environmental situation, the social situation in which he was brought up, he had to probably, whenever he was asked to do something, given a task, given an order, or simply asked something by one of the people that were slave owners, he probably was used probably through violence, to have to say things as quickly as possible. You don't want to waste time, and you want to emphasize those words that are in fact the most important ones as fast as possible. Because we do something similar on a completely different spectrum, but that's something that happens, for example, with military talk. Military men usually tend to speak very fast, and they also try to be concise. That's a characteristic of just a utilitarian aspect of the way you live your life that influences your vernacular, the way you speak. And that's one thing that I'm noticing.
In the 1930s and beyond, technology allowed some of these interviews to be recorded as part of both federal and independent projects. The details are often difficult to hear, but they remind us this history happened not too long ago, with names, faces, and stories. Do we know roughly how many of these recordings exist?
The recordings are relatively rare,
Of course.
but the recordings come from a much larger and really important and in many ways unsung collecting effort that took place. In terms of audio technology, most of it was not recorded by audio because the technology didn't exist, or at least in any kind of widespread accessible way when most of those were conducted. So it's really just a handful of audio recordings we have.
In 1974, a woman named Celia Black, at the age of 114 years old, and shortly before her death, recalled picking cotton in Texas as a child born into slavery.
All right, let's
I didn't have to pick cotton or nothing.
I've been doing nothing but working in the field. Working in the field, oh goodness. When my husband would go out west and pick cotton. Go out west every year. We've been this year going out there picking cotton.
One of the things that kind of struck me when you have an interview recorded in 19...
One second, I want to say a few things about the lady. So once again, we notice non-rhoticity, that drop in the R. I'm noticing, apart from the distinctive intonation pattern that I just mentioned, I see negative concords. She's using double negative, so that's another thing. And I'm noticing simplified diphthongs and the absence of copula. So I think they tend to skip is and are. Once again, it could be all part of, or basically just say what you need in order to convey or communicate a specific information, whether it be, I imagine, between slaves or whether it be to the owner. Let's see, this is interesting.
74, for some Black Americans, I mean, they're one generation removed from slavery.
In some ways, we think of slavery as ancient history. We think of it as something that happened a very long time ago to people we couldn't possibly have known. I was 6, 7 years old in 1974. So it's kind of amazing that we were alive at the same time. I was alive at the same time who was someone who had been born enslaved.
Alex Haley's...
Yeah, that's a good point that he's making. I'd like to underline, though, that slavery in the ancient period, whether it be slavery among the ancient Egyptians, for instance, in the Bronze Age, in the Iron Age, or whether it be slavery in the classical period in the Mediterranean world, so with the Romans and the Greeks, I know we use the same term as that we use for, but they function completely differently. And in fact, in some aspects, I wouldn't even use the same term. I'm going to be honest with you. And that's the same with biblical slavery. I'm considering making a video about it on my history channel, where we actually look at the difference between slavery in the Bible, slavery in the classical period, which is closer to the way it was in the Bible, and chattel slavery and the way it worked, which is very different to ancient. I honestly don't think we should use the same term. But I won't go too extensive onto it.
Roots premiered on ABC just 3 years after this interview with Celia Black.
What's your name? Kunta Kinte.
Alex Haley came into his work, Roots, what became Roots, really, through his grandmother's stories. So we're really talking about oftentimes great-grandparents.
Okay, so let me see if there is another recording, because I'm more interested in the linguistic aspect rather than, let me see.
An enormous preservation effort. The first-hand accounts shedding light on the darkest chapters in our American history, yet also revealing incredible African-American strength and survival.
Didn't you have some entertainment, doing a dancing or anything?
Oh, I used to dance, but I don't do it now.
Oh.
No, I don't dance now. I try my best to serve my master. I'm trying my best to serve my Heavenly Father.
You hear these recordings. What were the emotions when you hear, the recollections of Celia Black?
First is just the miracle of her survival. It's just that I'm actually hearing this person who had been enslaved. That's kind of a miracle.
Celia Black was alive when Abraham Lincoln was president.
Wow.
And lived to see the resignation of President Richard Nixon.
Oh, man.
You remember Abraham Lincoln, President?
I know where they gave him a good name. Oh, Abraham Lincoln. They thought Abraham they thought everybody thought Abraham was the best president there was.
And she sounds adorable, to be honest. I wonder if, because another thing that I'm expecting now, it's non-standard plural forms. It's another thing that often happens in what could be hypothetically considered as Creole. Although I don't know, honestly, if that's... I mean, it's an hypothesis. Whether it's a Creole or a dialect, perhaps it's something we might need some time to discuss. A lot of this happens because of varying degrees of isolation from, for example, white people. And that's why there is a difference that is connected. Because you see, your ethnicity doesn't determine the way you speak. It's who you hang out with. In other words, if you have a black child and he's raised in a white family, on the phone, he will sound white. And vice versa, by the way. The opposite can happen too. It's a lot less common, but it can happen too. So when we hear a typical accent and we're like, oh yeah, these are black people 100%, it's because of isolation and sort of intermingling with people of a specific ethnic group. It's something that happens a lot with Chinese Americans as well. They tend to hang among themselves, if you will. And this reinforces certain accent patterns. To that, add regional variations, because you have to remember as well that it wasn't just a matter of cotton, rice, tobacco, sugar. It changes the place where these plantations were, which is going to influence the way they speak. Let's see if we can get more recordings. The preservation is fascinating, absolutely something I strongly support.
As a boy, those are fascinating. You say, wow.
My grandfather had some big old oxen. He had one with a big wide horns. Oh, it looked like a house. Wide horns. And I used to sit up there and clean them horns. And then his name was Coley. And the other one was named Lep.
Was it ever difficult to talk about...
Incredible memory, by the way, on the lady.
Slavery?
Yes, and I think what made it so difficult is just realizing, how emotional it was and what they went through. You try to put yourself into their physical being and to understand what they went through, and it is scary.
You've heard the recording of your great-grandmother in 1974.
Oh, it's his great-grandmother.
It was very challenging for me to hear. When they asked her the question about what it was like working in the fields, the heat in Texas, the humidity, and sometimes 105, 110 degrees, and I just can't fathom waking up, sun up to sundown, working in the fields. How did they do it? How did they do it?
You learn about slavery in America, and I think especially being a Black American, the initial emotion is anger.
There's the history of slavery as an institution, which was all about oppressing people. And that's a very dark history that I think should make us angry.
Let me see. Any more recordings?
And to know their ancestors' names and stories the way that Curtis knows Celia.
You had a chance to...
Okay, cool. Well, anyways, I enjoyed the recordings. It was very interesting. We nice to do maybe a deeper analysis of it. Just I wish we had more. But anyways, thank you very much. I hope you appreciated it. And thank you for watching. Ciao, ciao.